This is Cara McKinnon with Episode 3 of the Feminist Romantic. As promised, this episode's topic is the Starz adaptation of Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series, specifically the Season 3 premiere. I have an in-depth review over on my Outlander blog, outlanderspoilers.com, so I won't really be talking about the Season 3 premiere as an episode, but I do want to talk about adaptation from book to screen and why some choices may have been made. Warning, there will be spoilers for all of the Outlander series up through the Season 3 premiere. I'll try to keep other spoilers to a minimum, but I may need to talk about ripple effects into future plotlines, so I'll probably also hint at things to come. Let's begin. For readers of Voyager, Season 3 of Outlander begins in both a familiar and a different place than expected. The book opens with Jamie thinking that he's dead, and only slowly coming to the realization that he's still alive and laying under the body of Blackjack Randall. We get something similar in the show, but it's not the same. They have, thank goodness, apparently decided to get rid of voiceover this season. So that means no inner monologue telling us that Jamie thinks he's dead, and reasons that he must be in purgatory because hell would be worse and he doesn't deserve to go to heaven. But what we do get are flashes of the battle. Perhaps more than I wanted, actually. But a TV show has to make choices. The very long ambiguity and subtlety of Jamie's PTSD-induced amnesia regarding the Battle of Culloden in the books doesn't pay off the promise of the second season of the television show, which abandoned the love story in favor of the war. So even though I wish they'd gone for subtlety, instead they went for spectacle and horror. We got lots of shots of explosions, stabbing and slashing, musket volleys, and Scottish shoulders. We got lots of shots of explosions, stabbing and slashing, musket volleys, and Scottish soldiers being stabbed with bayonets where they lay dying on the field. One adaptation that is immediately apparent in all of these war scenes is that Jamie remembers killing Blackjack Randall, and remembers Randall wounding Jamie in the thigh. It's not obvious on screen, but book readers know that the weight of Randall's body on top of Jamie is the only thing that kept Jamie from bleeding out due to nicking of his femoral artery. It's not obvious on screen, but book readers know that the weight of Randall's body on top of Jamie is the only thing that kept Jamie from bleeding out due to the nicking of his femoral artery. But what book readers didn't know is that Jamie landed the killing blow to Jack. In the books, Jamie has never remembered that moment, and has come to peace with the not knowing, including in the most recent book, written in My Own Heart's Blood, which is set about 35 years later. So, this is a big deal for readers of the book, to know for sure that, at least in the TV show, Jamie is the one that killed Blackjack. That's a big choice. The change of having Jamie remember killing Blackjack will have subtle but very important long-term effects. I won't spoil details for those of you who haven't yet read the books, but for those of you who have, the name Stephen Bonnet should explain exactly what I mean. And of course, there's no guarantee that the Starz show will actually get to the events involving Stephen Bonnet in the next season, which is the only season that we have for sure to look forward to. But there's no reason to believe that they won't either, as they do take place in the next book, Drums of Autumn. If the show does get to the events involving Stephen Bonnet, they'll have to handle them a little bit differently than how it was handled in the books, because Jamie now remembers killing Blackjack Randall. So that's one adaptation. Another is that Rupert is still alive at this point in the story. In the book series, Rupert died at the Battle of Falkirk in Dragonfly and Amber. But after the death of Angus at Prestonpans in Season 2, they couldn't kill off the beloved Rupert a single episode later. Besides, Grant O'Rourke's portrayal took a minor, mostly forgettable character and turned him into a beloved member of the cast. So, they kept him around and made him the Mackenzie that witnessed Jamie killing Dougal right before Culloden at the end of Season 2. And by putting Rupert in that role, and now giving him and Jamie time to talk about what happened, it allows Jamie to feel, not forgiven, because Rupert doesn't offer forgiveness, but at peace about what Dougal forced Jamie to do. Rupert will not go to his death angry, and neither should Jamie. It's a lovely scene, and my favorite adaptive choice for this episode. Pretty much the show, period. If they could have managed to save Rupert entirely, I would have liked that even better. But I'm glad he had his last moments with Jamie, and that he faced his death with dignity and the humor that was so intrinsic to his personality. But by far, the biggest adaptation in the Season 3 premiere is the decision to follow Claire in the 1940s instead of the 1960s as in the book, and in the content of said period of time. In the flashbacks given in Voyager, Gabaldon glosses over Claire's pregnancy and giving birth, picking up when Brianna is about 3 months old. While the season premiere doesn't feel entirely out of step with what was set up in the books, it does place an awful lot of blame on Claire for not immediately becoming intimate again with Frank. Frank is written as being solicitous, somewhat progressive, and long-suffering in the TV show. In the books, he's written as having an affair with a woman who works at his college, and only being interested in resuming intimacy with Claire months after Brianna is born. That's a big difference. The TV show's treatment of Frank is problematic on a number of levels. Lonnie Diane Rich of Chipperish Media and the Sex and Whiskey Outlander podcast says it best. This is not Frank's story. And they try to make it Frank's story. Let me caveat here to say that I in no way conflate the writing of and portrayal of Frank Randall in the television show with Tobias Menzies as an actor. Tobias is amazing, and he's doing great work with the material that he has. But I'm very unhappy with the way his character is being written. Ron Moore has actually said many times that he sympathizes with Frank, and it's clear that he's trying to make this character more sympathetic and likable than he was in the books. But in a lot of ways, that attempt falls flat. It's unreasonable to expect a woman who has had a traumatic experience and fallen in love with someone else to turn off her emotions and willingly reestablish a relationship with her estranged husband. Knowing that he is treating Claire as though she is the cause of all their problems, when he's the one who forced her to choose, doesn't make me like him any better. His ultimatum in the end of season 2 was that she could stay married to him and give up all mention of Jamie forever, or he would leave. This is the 1940s, and she would be an unwed mother. Her life, and Brianna's as a bastard, would have been terrible. That's not much of a choice. And Claire did feel guilty about what happened, both in the books and in the television show. Claire was torn to pieces over her choice to stay in the past. Frank is still her husband, and she does love him, just not the same way she loves Jamie. So the adaptation here is a bit of a mess for me. Claire is made out to be a villain, and even her next-door neighbor, who hates her husband, tells Claire that she's lucky to have Frank. Which is just ridiculous, and sounded false in the scene. There's a lot of authorial intrusion there, clearly intended to press on Claire's guilty conscience. But by far, the worst addition to the TV show was the character of the dean of Frank's college and the obstetrician present at Brianna's birth, both of whom are examples of the worst stereotypes of the period. But sadly, stereotypical or not, they're all too believable when those sorts of actions and statements, like the dean who says that women will never be as competent or as intelligent as men, are still being made today. Think of the big kerfluffle over at Google with the guy's manifesto. I mean, yes, he was fired, but a lot of people actually agreed with him. Big problem, still happening in 2017. And the taking away of a woman's agency when it regards her body and her health. I don't even want to cross lines into discussions about choice, but just talking about health and wellness. Doctors don't listen to women. It is a proven thing, especially male doctors. They don't listen to us as regards our body. You'd think we would know, having lived in our bodies all of our lives, what it feels like when something's wrong. but we're dismissed. It's all in our heads until it's not. I personally have had several experiences of things being either misdiagnosed or going undiagnosed for a long time because doctors did not listen to me. So what happened to Claire is an extreme example of that sort of willful disbelief in a woman's knowledge of her own body. But it does happen. And things like that happen all the time. It was a terrifying scene for me to watch them put her under and not allow her to experience her childbirth, because having had a traumatic experience in her past with her miscarriage means she's even more invested in this baby's birth and that this baby will be born healthy. When she wakes up and screams, "Is the baby alive?" Clearly that is the thing that she was worried most about. My birth experiences, nowhere near as traumatic as that, but neither of my experiences were what I wanted them to be. My first child was induced, and induction is no fun, and my second child was breech and could not be delivered vaginally. So I had to have a C-section. I wanted a natural childbirth with both of my kids and didn't have it. And just from that experience of having certain things taken away from me by medical necessity means that I get a tiny bit of the frustration that she was having in that moment of, this is not how it's supposed to happen. And yes, while mine was because of medical necessity that I had to have interventions, and hers was because of idiocy that she had an unnecessary medical intervention, the end result emotionally is the same, which is that this is not what I wanted, and something was taken away from me. For me, I ended up having 2 healthy children, and that's wonderful. And Claire ends up having a healthy child, and that's wonderful. But in Claire's case, what happened should not have happened, and did not happen in the books. In the books, we don't find out much about the experience of her giving birth to Brianna at all, other than to know that Brianna had a caul, which, honestly, I don't see how she would even have known that, given what happened in the television show. So the caul is kind of a throwaway thing. It's one of those kind of mystical factors that comes in later, but it's not really that important as far as adaptation goes. So losing it, no big deal. But any of the stuff that Claire knows in the books about the experience of giving birth to Brianna is now gone in this adaptation. And it's gut-wrenching to know that the first person that had any interaction with her child, other than doctors, was Frank, and not Claire. Frank. This is not Frank's story. It's horrific on a number of levels that her child was taken away from her by force, without her consent, and given to Frank. This might sound like hyperbole to a lot of people. Oh, what's the big deal? The baby was born, it's healthy, he's her husband. But it's a big deal. And I don't think this is hyperbole to say that it's horrific. It's a terrible thing that happened. And to then have them turn around and have her have this emotional moment with Frank that was then undercut by a stupid nurse is gut-wrenching to me, because what happens in that moment is that she is so relieved that her baby is alive that she will reach out for whatever connection that she can make. She even apologizes to Frank for throwing something at him after he has accused her of the worst sort of villainy. So the end of this episode is a little rough for me, and it's all because of this adaptive choice that Ron Moore made all the way back in the beginning of season 1 to make Frank into some sort of pillar of husbandhood. I don't know if that's a word, but it is a word now. He is a pillar of husbandhood in Ron Moore's opinion. In my opinion, Frank is a philanderer and was never the right person for Claire. On my blog, my Cara McKinnon blog, I have talked about love triangles and how it's important that in a actual love triangle that all the options, all of the angles of the triangle are equal, right? That both men need to be stand-up guys who are both good people. One of them simply is wrong for your female character or male character if you're writing a love triangle in a gay romance, or all women if you're writing it in a lesbian romance, or whatever your combinations are. They all need to be equal choices. Which is why Outlander is not a love triangle. Because Frank is not only clearly not right for Claire. In the books, he's condescending. Claire does what he wants her to do in the first book. She defers to him. She lets him make decisions. She even asks him questions to let him appear more intelligent than her, even when she would have known the answers. In the television show of Outlander in the very first season, they have Claire recognize blood on the doorstep of their bed and breakfast, because obviously a combat nurse is going to know what blood looks like. And that's literally what she says. I think I know what blood looks like. In the books, however, she asks Frank, what is that? And he's the one who says, I think it's blood. And I'm reading a lot into it by saying that I think that she asked that question so that he could answer it. But it does make sense that a combat nurse would know what blood looks like. So their relationship was doomed from the very beginning in the books. And there is the sense, although not the outright statement, that Frank cheated on Claire during the war. And again, when they were apart, when she was in the past, I mean, did she cheat on him with Jamie? Yes, she did. So I'm not saying there's no blame to be had. And Claire actually does blame herself. It tears her apart to have made that choice, to have stayed with Jamie. It's a big deal for her. And she chose it anyway, knowing what she was doing to Frank. But he did the same things to her, and contextually, in the pages of Voyager, he is having an affair while she is pregnant with Brianna. It's there, on the page, outright. He has other affairs while Brianna is a child and as she's growing up. He is not the bending over backwards, solicitous, progressive husband that's portrayed in the television show. And the change is baffling to me, that they had to turn Frank into some kind of sympathetic character. It doesn't make things more complicated or interesting. What it does is it turns Claire into a villain. Because she's cold to Frank. Well, duh. She's enormously pregnant, which means you don't want to be touched anyway. At least I didn't. Even by my husband, who was the father of my child and who I loved very much. I didn't want anybody to touch me. So, hugely pregnant, uncomfortable, and yeah, still in love with somebody else. So, she has sworn to not talk about Jamie, and she has followed that, as she says in the TV show, to the letter. I'm entirely on Claire's side here. And trying to make Frank into a sympathetic character makes it look like she's the villain. But what he's doing is gaslighting her. He forced her to make a choice, and is now unhappy that she didn't commit wholeheartedly to him in this new relationship. But of course she didn't. Of course she couldn't. I don't think that that's more interesting or complicated or satisfying as a viewer. I remember thinking in the books that at the point where Frank wanted to become intimate with Claire again, that she actually let him. There's one scene in particular that squicks me out just a little bit about him nursing. Yeah, he nurses. And I remember thinking, that is so intimate. Like, beyond intimate. And I could see her doing that with Jamie, but with Frank? And thinking, man, I wish she was a lot colder to him. But now that I've seen that on the television show, I kind of wish that I could take that back. And I'm sorry, Diana Gabaldon, because I understand now why you made some of the choices you did. I might not have taken it that far, but her choice to try to recover her relationship with Frank makes sense to me. And having seen this on screen, yeah, it's just painful to try to portray him as the one that's trying really hard to get them back together and her as the one that is holding back, because it should be difficult for both of them. Neither one of them should be the villain here. And they should both have made the bad choices and both continue to make good and bad choices. And that is what is complicated and interesting. And trying to show us these stereotypical, horrible 40s men in the dean and the obstetrician versus so-called progressive Frank. I see what you're doing there, Ron Moore. I see that we're supposed to say, oh, Frank is so wonderful compared to these dudes. But he's really not that wonderful. I am worried about what's going to happen in the rest of the season because of this. At least until the midpoint where Jamie and Claire get back together. Spoilers. Like you didn't know they were going to get back together. But I am afraid that as we watch Claire try to balance her calling, healing, with motherhood and being a wife in this era when the home is where a woman is, quote, supposed to be, is going to vilify her for making that choice. I want to root for her as we watch her be true to herself and her work, not cringe as the show subtly hints that she's an unnatural woman or somehow lesser, because she doesn't sacrifice herself, her emotions, and her autonomy at the altar of her husband and child. This podcast is called The Feminist Romantic because I think women should be able to have both love and a family and a career. Or either one. Or whatever she wants, really. So I do worry about how far down the rabbit hole this season will go before we finally come back to Claire and Jamie. The next few episodes should reveal more about how far away from the books they intend to go. And if you want to see my speculations on what they're going to do, I have a Season 3 speculation page on my Outlander Spoilers blog. I don't have an easy summation for this episode of The Feminist Romantic, except to say that I recognize how difficult it is to adapt one story from the medium of books to the medium of television. I appreciate that changes must be made to allow for the differences between text and screen. And while I may not always agree with those changes, I'm willing to accept most of them, and then speculate on how the changes will ripple outward. Sometimes the changes lead to amazing things, like the character of Rupert and how much more awesome Murtagh is in this show versus the books. But other times, they're frustrating and upsetting because they take away things that were special or important from the source material, like trying to turn Frank into an actual substitute for Jamie. Spoilers, he's not! Adaptations almost never succeed perfectly, and when they do, or on the rare occasion surpass the source material, it's because they find their own magic or manage to capture the essence of the source material's magic. My verdict is still out on the Outlander adaptation. When they've gotten it right, it has been transcendent. But when they've gotten it wrong, it has been truly awful. We'll have to wait and see what happens next. That's all for now. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a discussion of connected romance series, which is to say, romance series set in the same world, often with the same family, but where each book follows a different couple, versus series that follow the same couple over the course of several books. If you have some series to recommend to me, specifically of the ones that follow a single couple, because that's less common, please let me know. You can email me at thefeministromantic@gmail.com or leave a comment on my blog at thefeministromantic.com. I love to hear from listeners, so even if you don't have a recommendation and you just want to talk to me or give me your thoughts on this episode or anything else, let me know. Until next time, I'm Cara McKinnon from the Feminist Romantic. Bye for now.